Welcome to Careers Unwrapped, where we delve into real-life career stories from successful people who've been through it all, the ups and the downs. We'll get their raw, honest, actionable advice and be the careers talk they wish they'd had when they started out. As someone who has had a varied career, from soldier to salesman, expedition leader to entrepreneur, he knows firsthand that your career doesn't always lead you where you expect it to. Here's your host, Mark Fawcett.
So hello and welcome to Careers Unwrapped. I'm your host, Mark Fawcett. With me today is Nicola Marfleet. She's governor of His Majesty's Prison Woodhill. Nicola's been working in the prison service for, I think, nearly 24, 25 years. We're going to look at what it's like to be a prison officer and a governor, what a career in the prison office, in the prison service looks and feels like. And she's going to be talking about how she leveled up her own career and the lessons she's learned from the process. So, Nikki, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I think the first thing that would be really interesting to know is what made you think this could be the career for you? What was the first trigger? What first inspired you?
I mean, it's a great question to start with because it was nowhere on my radar. I actually went and did a photography degree. I was pursuing art and out of the blue got invited into Maidstone Prison just through a charity sort of event. And the first prisoner I spoke to was just so normal. I don't know what I thought a prison would be like, but it really shocked me into thinking, wow, there's a different life behind these walls. And so my advantage was then for about 3 years, I signed up as a volunteer, got my vetting to go into that local prison and sort of help them with music, just to be part of their church services as it was on a Sunday. So I kind of had that in my mind. But really what got me in as a career was then coming out of university thinking, I don't want an office job. It was just in my mind, I don't want to sit behind a desk. The irony slightly, it's now I'm a governor, I'm sadly often behind a desk, but I just wanted something exciting. I was looking at a career in things like the military or the police, like all these cool jobs as I thought, and just found myself sitting down, typing into the computer these different jobs. And when this one came up, I thought, actually, that excites me.
And it's not a common career route, clearly, because there's a lot of reporting about the need for more staffing potentially in prisons, which we might come on to. But what did your immediate close friends and family think when you said, I'm going to go into the prisons?
Yeah, and I didn't know anybody at that stage who worked in prison. So I really was the first in our entire group that was considering this. I mean, they were worried. You know, they had the same sort of understanding at that stage that I did of what we saw in the papers or what we saw in the press. And I think, you know, they also knew my character and they knew I was sort of quite a determined, teenager. And, you know, I'd kind of grown up with this tenacity and this sort of grit that actually a lot of them were like, oh, yeah, you should go and do it. So I did have their kind of support when I applied. Because I applied for a fast track route, which meant there was only 20 spaces. I kind of just threw my application in and thought, I'll hope for the best. You know, if fate means I'm not going to get it. So it was a bit sort of chancing my arm, and then got a space and then thought, well, this is great. You know, I'll do the training. I liked the idea of having a uniformed service, the camaraderie that I thought you would probably get. And all of that proved to be true.
Yeah, it's actually really familiar from my perspective because I was at university. I was doing economics and history, and my brother and I were the first royal family to ever go to university. And then I came back at one point and said, actually, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go and join the army. And my family were stunned. There was no track record. In fact, I was pretty surprised. So for me too, it's a sort of left field choice to begin with. And so jumping forward to today then, as a prison governor, what does your average week look like? What's in your diary for the week ahead?
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, the job doesn't change in terms of the core skills and the core elements of who I am, whether I'm a prison officer or a prison governor. Obviously, as governor, I'm overall in charge for the whole prison. And so that means the safety, the well-being, the care, the discipline of the prisoners and also the staff. You know, I'm equally in charge of the staff, how they are, you know, recruiting, but also retaining them. Once we get them in, we want to keep them. And the great thing about the prison service is it's a sort of job that you could do for 4 years years, or you could do for, 35 years. And so, in my day to day now is about delegating leaders below me. And we would say, even as an officer, you're a leader because you're a person that has a sphere of influence. You will have prisoners that you care for, that you were in charge of. And so it's about delegating to make sure that everything sort of runs smoothly, but also then being visible and getting out there and seeing prisoners, seeing staff. Today I've got 2 staff meetings and a prison council. So, there's lots of ways that we can kind of communicate with prisoners. The prisoners, will have sometimes really deep needs or profound fears, particularly with upcoming trials or the loss of a loved one outside. We want to show empathy for the situation that they're in. That's part of the statement of purpose, actually, that's on the back of our ID badges. It says that, we have to keep them in custody. So that's all the security element, but also we have to care for them with humanity. And that's the compassionate aspect.
And just thinking then of your most recent, newest junior officers who've come to you in, let's say, the last year or so, what's their backgrounds, their qualifications, their level of experience? Who's joining at the bottom rung of the prison officer ladder at the moment?
Really excitedly, we take from all backgrounds, all walks of life. And so we have people who come directly out of leaving the military as sort of as a second career. We equally have people leaving straight from school with 5 GCSEs. So we really do take anybody. For me, it's more about people who want to do a job well. So, if you are looking to kind of scratch around and cut corners, this 100% is not the job for you. It is so important that we follow the procedures. Otherwise, we would have an escape, and so that is really important. But equally, we will take people who just have a real passion to, join a worthwhile career, and we will train you, we will look after you. And so for the newest people that are joining us, I've actually just increased the size of our new colleague mentor program, so that when people get here, we've got more people who will really sort of hold hands and say, this is how to do it. Because once you arrive back from training, you have 2 weeks of shadowing, and then you are out on the wings. So we want you really early to start getting your hands dirty, get stuck into the job. But of course, you're not entirely on your own. There is always people. And actually, that's why, for me, thinking back to why I chose this career over other careers, was really the difference between something like the police force, the police service, and the prison service, is that, we deal with known risk. We know our prisoners. And so, if I get into trouble as a prison officer, I know that there is an alarm bell there, or I've got a radio, and I'm never that far away from colleagues. Whereas, a service like the police, you might be in a patrol car on your own and help might be minutes away. So, we are a closed community. We'll have a number of different officers working on each site together. So we really are interested in just taking anybody who's got a real kind of strength of character, and then we will train you.
So you mentioned there are strengths of character. What else are you really looking for when you're assessing the applicants to the prison service? What are the values or the standards or the characters that you're searching for?
Yeah, the first one I always mention is integrity. We deal in a world, not just in the prison service, everywhere where, corruption or trying to take the easy line is a real problem. And, so the first thing is about integrity and character. We can then build on that. I think the second one is, like I said, wanting to do the job well, but also just having that tenacity to keep going. You do need a resilience to do this job. And some people do apply, and then within 3 days are like, I've made a mistake. And actually, we probably could have spotted that too. So, let's all be honest with each other. This is a difficult job, but I love it. The reason I'm still here 24 years later is because there's still something that drives me to come to work every single day. You get to save lives, you get to change lives, you get to transform and be that kind of almost mentor. It's a bit like, where we think back to our favorite teacher. Somebody I can name the 2 teachers that really impacted my life. That's kind of who we want to be as prison officers as well, is to help some of these guys address their offending behavior and decide to change their lives around. And, the thought of somebody coming into this job who's got that real ability to influence, to listen, to impact lives is exactly what we're looking for in our new officers.
Now, we've all seen the movies, seen the films with prisons at the heart of them. A lot of them American films, everything from, Shawshank through to Scarf. What are some of the real misconceptions or stereotypes, if you want, about prison officers that you see all the time or that you'd like to dispel?
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting how many people who don't work in the prison service assume that because I'm a woman, I work in a women's prison. So that's the first misconception that I often deal with. And I think the other thing is that, you assume that a prison officer is going to be, predominantly male, tall, big, muscly, that's what I thought when I joined. And then I met a prison officer who herself was about 4'6", and we really do involve ourselves in all types of personality and person to be prison officers. And it really is about having that skill to be able to talk to people and to talk people down as well. That ability to wade into conflict, but be able to just calm it. So I think, the big films where it's violent and there's, weapons and electric doors, actually that's not the reality. The reality is, prisoners will call me Nikki, but I will still have a sort of line of respect there that I do expect them, because also that's about teaching them boundaries. So we want to celebrate when achievements are made. One of the things that we are trying to do, for instance, is where we have prisoners who have particular difficulties or learning difficulties or just are not making progress and moving forward. We want to try and engage with their families. And so, we want our prison officers to have the skills to talk to families as well as to talk to prisoners. And also, people who want to stay with us and really forge a career out of this. There are so many things that the prison service offers in terms of improving yourself as an individual, as a leader, whether that's apprenticeships that you can do for free through the prison service, all that kind of thing. So people that actually want to be here are not just looking to, pay their rent or pay their mortgage.
And so your particular prison, Woodhill, just give us a quick a picture. How many prisoners are there and what types and categories of prisoners do you have?
So at the moment, we've got a couple of wings just temporarily closed. So we're sitting just under 400 prisoners, and we hold Category A prisoners down to Cat B, and then we will regrade people to Category C and then move them onto a Cat C prison.
And what does Category A and Category B mean to outsiders? What sort of crime split, or how long are they in for? How are you judging that?
So there's 4 categories at the moment. So the Category A is the highest. Those are the people for whom escape must be made impossible. And so we have a few of those sort of scattered, around the prison, because originally we were a Category A prison. So we are built to that specification. And then the majority of who we hold is Category B prisoners. So those are people that, would have all sorts of different types of crimes. But, they will have a certain length of time, maybe anything just from sort of, a couple of months up to, many, many years. So it really is a mixed bag. It's not just kind of like you're going to only look after murderers or, whatever. We've got a whole shebang of people here. And the difficulty and the sort of the interest of working in that kind of community is that, you really are different things to different people. But a Category D would be an open prison. And if somebody was serving a long sentence of sort of, 25 years, the idea is that they sort of progress through the stages and then they get to an open prison before they're then released. Because what we try and do is make sure that people live law-abiding and positive lives, both in custody and also on release. So it isn't about a holiday camp, it's the usual thing that I hear on sort of Twitter and stuff like that. It's about preparing them to be released, preparing them to have the skills to actually be able to go back out into society and not move back into a life of crime again.
So obviously there's a key area you've mentioned around security. There's a key area around the development of the person, the prisoner, trying to move from there on the categories and hopefully ultimately trying to have them not reoffend. But in all of this, especially with Category A prisoners, an outsider would be thinking, how much violence am I going to face if I become a prison officer? What's it actually going to be like that? So what is the real level of threat or of fear that a prison officer has to deal with?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the question we all want to ask, isn't it, when we're considering a career in the prison service? So it's the right question to ask. I think it really differs on the prisons that you're at. And what I would say is that the reason that we train our prison officers to be communicators is because we know from research that if men are in conflict with each other, so in the situation I'm in, I work in a men's prison, the same in women's prisons as well, that quite often they actually want somebody to step in and mediate so that they don't have to keep their testosterone, showing that they're the hard man. And what we are trying to all the time is upskill ourselves as prison officers is to know how to intervene to avoid that violence. So at the moment at Woodhill, we have a mediation program which uses prisoners and staff trained as mediators where people can self-refer or others can refer as a third party. But the truth is, we will never, ever 100% completely eradicate violence from prisons. So yes, you are likely to see conflict. And as much as I would like to say you will never get hurt within this career, you may get hurt. And we do everything we can to reduce that. But, I think I was assaulted twice as a prison officer when I worked through about sort of 10 years worth of service when I was in uniform. And neither of those times was I badly injured. So, an assault can be anything from being spat at to really, being seriously hurt. And so it isn't as manifest as I think people worry about when they come in. There are some prison officers who are never hurt throughout their entire career, but equally never have to use force in their entire career. And then you have other prison officers who will have both of those things within their career. But certainly it's something we take very, very seriously. And, it is, I go up into the wings all the time and I never worry about getting hurt. We train people, we give people the proper equipment to know how to respond as they can feel things starting to escalate.
And just trying to get under the skin of the role and what it actually feels like. When have you been personally most afraid or most fearful? It doesn't matter whether something actually happened or not, more when you have felt fear. Can you just describe that to us?
Yeah, so I know the exact moment that was, and it was when I had a prisoner who I unlocked from his cell. He came out of his cell to speak to me, and it was quite a difficult conversation we were having. And he started to really shout at me from quite close proximity. And I suddenly thought, maybe I should have had a few more colleagues around before I started this. So that was a massive learning lesson for me. I would never do it in that same way again. But actually, what saved me on that incident was that he was in a cell with his brother. And I quickly thought, because he was really shouting in my face, and I could already see officers starting to make their way towards me. But what saved me was his brother was in his cell. And so I reopened the door and I said to his brother, I'm not going to talk to him while he's shouting at me like this, and just fronted it out. And his brother said to him, mate, you need to calm down, and got him back under control. And I said, thank you. And then I said, right, I will speak to you about this, but don't shout at me. But as I walked away, my heart was pounding, and it took me a couple of weeks for, me to get my nerves fully back because, every time somebody was shouting, I'd be a bit jumpy. So it's weird because, like you said, I wasn't hurt, but that was the time that I most remember thinking it made me wobble.
I found myself when I was in the army that when violence was actually happening was never the time that I was feeling fear because I had things to do then. It was when there was an imminent threat of violence that, that heart picking up, that sort of slight sweat of, right, we're about to go. And I imagine that that's something by the sound of what you're describing, that you may, if you do this sort of role, you may have that threat, that feeling of imminent trouble or violence several times. But if you're thinking about how you're doing it, if you're communicating, listening and speaking, then the chances of you actually facing or dealing with violence are considerably less.
Yeah. Yes, we have body worn cameras. I often, again, as a woman, I will sometimes say to them, look, could you take a step back? You're starting to get a little bit too close to me. I'm feeling a bit intimidated. Which, I'm not sure all the male officers would be happy to say that, but I always say that to them, and they always go, oh, sorry, miss, sorry. Because sometimes they're getting passionate and they don't realize that they can come across as intimidating. And so all the time it's helping them to be self-aware as well. But I agree, when something big does kick off, and we see our units of officers moving together as one team, it's incredible to watch. And often it's that weird thing of, an outsider may think, gosh, it was a terrible day for those officers because they had that big event, but they'll be going, today was brilliant, because what they're trying to say is, rather than saying, oh, inappropriately, yeah, we got to use, whatever, it's about they're acknowledging that they worked together well as a team, that they retained and regained control, and they brought an incident to a successful conclusion.
You don't stay in a career for nearly 25 years without having a passion for it. And clearly, just listening to you speak, that there's huge amount of passion for this work. What perhaps have been individually, perhaps specific prisoners or specific incidents, what have been the biggest rewards that you can recall, personal rewards for you at your career?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the individual reward is always the prisoner changing their life around. And I think naively, when I started as a prison officer, I thought I'm going to change the world. And I've reassessed, actually changing the world looks like a lot of different things. The public sector is under huge pressure. We know that. It takes real determination to stay in a job where you think, how do we fix this? The reason that I find still reward daily is because I get the privilege, and I use that word deliberately, of being this side of the wall. I get to go to speak to those men. I get to say to them, look, you've got a choice. Some of them are young lads. I remember talking to a guy once who was exactly the same age as my brother, pretty much born on the same day. And I said to him, you are the same age as friends and relations I've got outside, but you get to make the choice now. Are you going to stay in prison for the rest of your life, or can we work with you to really give you the opportunity to progress? And I think there is a satisfaction in seeing that when somebody writes to you, as they do write to me, saying, Miss, thank you for doing this. Thank you for the difference that you made. When I reach out to family members, the amount of emails I get from mums who are worried about their sons, and I'm just able to pick up the phone to them and they hear me, they understand that we're not just looking at their son as a number, to use their word. And often they will burst into tears because the governor has bothered to ring them to say, I know your son by name. I'll go up and see him tomorrow. I promise we will look after him. And the relief in their voices when they understand that their son or their daughter is not just stuck in a system. So that brings me deep personal reward. And then, of course, there's the benefits of being in a good service. And, I know maybe people at the beginning of their careers are not thinking about pensions, but actually we still have one of the better pensions. We've just had a pay rise last year for prison officers. So it's a pretty good wage for prison officers. And all of that kind of thing that you're looking at the start of a career is beneficial. And then, as I said, I did my master's degree through the prison service, and I've just finished an apprenticeship, level 7 apprenticeship. And I could not have afforded those myself. But through working in the prison service, you have opportunity to specialize. You can be a dog handler, you can be a PE instructor, you can, gain promotion. There's so many things. I trained to be the tornado response team. I did that for 5 years, which is sort of the advanced control and restraint training that you see sometimes on the tellies going into, riots and things like that. It's an exciting job. It's what I wanted it to be, and I love it.
And so if I was to join up and, let's say my early 20s, and I get through the selection process. You mentioned earlier that I might be actually out facing prisoners within a couple of weeks. But what is my training? What am I going to be going through in the first 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks to get to the level that means I can do the job and I have the confidence to do it?
Yeah. So quite a lot of prisons will now do open days for people that are actually in the application process. Because I think that's, again, the reason I joined was because I'd already been inside to visit. And so I already had an idea and an impression. So there's a lot more really great stuff that's becoming accessible, both literally in terms of being able to come in and visit, but also online. We really want you to get an idea of what it is that you're stepping into, so that it's not that kind of, major culture shock when you come in. But you will then have to pass vetting. So once your vetting is completed, we'll then bring you in, we'll make sure that you've got your uniform, and then we will send you away for an initial training segment. And I think that's 6 or 7 weeks at the moment. My training was the best couple of months of my life up to that point. I had such fun, learning hard, making friends, so colleagues that I joined service with today, some of them are also prison governors, and we are friends for life. You really cement in that learning, in terms of other people going in. And then, from there, we'll then get you back. You'll have 2 weeks of shadowing, working with our mentors. So we'll start to expose you to the wings gently. And then when you are on a wing, you'll have a buddy, and you'll also have a supervising officer who will look out for you. But we will continue to upskill you into the jobs that you will be doing. We'll start you off gently, but your exposure directly to the front line as such will be fairly immediate, because you can't really learn unless you're absolutely on the wings. But we will teach you through it and train you through it. And you'll be surprised how quickly you adjust into that space.
So you've risen obviously to a position of some seniority and leadership, and each prison governor will bring their own personality, their own characteristics and experiences to their role. So you've got to run an environment with 400 prisoners. You said some may be suffering from mental health issues. Some are undoubtedly violent and dangerous, and you can't let them escape. How do you actually make the environment run as a leader and somebody who's there to sort of set the culture? What's your approach to leadership in this circumstance?
Yeah, it's a great question. It really is something that just really drives who I am and who I want to be as a leader, is sort of setting this culture of, the way we behave towards each other as colleagues to each other, but also as officers to prisoners matters. And, actually that blue poster just up behind me is our sort of set of community values. And we unashamedly, want our prisoners and our staff to work together against a set of values, to say, actually, we're all here. We all spend so many hours in this kind of behind these walls. Actually, let's try and get on with each other, And so I think in terms of what I'm trying to do is really say, if you choose us, we will choose you, to those that come into service and say, we want to invest into you. We want you to grow as leaders, where there are delays, don't just get frustrated by those, but use those to invest into yourself. That's the one bit of advice I think I would give to anybody is, if you are currently in a position where you are saying, gosh, I'm so fed up of waiting. I have been there. I wasn't the governor forever. I was an officer to start with, and sort of looking upwards and thinking, it's taking so long. But actually, I chose to have an attitude of thinking, right, what can I learn from here? Even from leaders above me or people around me, how do they do it? Right, I'm going to take that bit. I'm going to remember that. I'm going to try and invest that into what I'm doing. And so we have that within our prison. But also, we do sort of staff days. We do reward and recognition, where we really want to celebrate the people that are doing things well. And it's not always about achievement. It sometimes is about their attitude, their kindness towards each other, looking out for a mate, looking out for a colleague who's struggled. All of that kind of stuff builds into an environment where it isn't just keys and gates and locks. It can't be that. It would be, such a hopeless environment. It's about investing and ingesting hope into the lives of the men that live here, but also, into a place where people want to work and come to work.
I think that's interesting, because you mentioned the values that you've got written down, but you also talk about the way you act. And I think that an organization can have all of its written values, its mission statements, its beliefs, and that it's important, definitely, but it's the way that an individual leader behaves that really sets the culture, far more than anything that's written down. I mean, you come in and have a succession of bad days, that moves around the organization. You come in with a succession of positive days and attitudes, that flows through as well. How do you personally set your own standards or keep yourself up and vibrant as a leader?
I think every leader needs to be an active learner. If you ever get to the point where you think, well, I know it all, then, actually you shouldn't be in the position you're in. So I actively always try and learn, whether that's podcasts, whether that's Twitter, like whatever it might be, just taking sound bites and little bits that can invest into my life, or reading a book, or, whatever. And then, in terms of who I am, I remember, the quote that says, every leader is contagious, or the attitude of every leader is contagious. And, my attitude is about my own self-regulation. So I am allowed to have bad days. But what I'm not allowed to do is thump the table and bang the table and shout and stuff, because if exactly that then becomes too contagious. And so that has a level of self-discipline to acknowledge I'm having a bad day. Therefore, I'm just going to shut my door and I'm just going to make sure that the queue outside gives me sort of 10 minutes so that I can calm back down. And I think that's who I want to be as a leader, but equally to talk about those values, to talk about my vision, as much as I can. So it sort of drips into everything we do without me having to say, and this is one of our values. It's about just in the prison service, we talk about every contact matters, but actually there's that other great quote that says every contact leaves a trace, which I like, because that's very sort of CSI, but it's true. If every contact leaves a trace, it's not just about catching the criminals. It's about, well, what trace am I leaving from my attitude? If I'm barking at people, then I'm not going to get the best out of them. But equally, it's not just about, saying to everybody, didn't we do great? If we leave a door open, somebody is going to get a proper telling off. But it's about then holding people to accountable in a way that they can grow. And of course, when we have new officers, they can make mistakes, and we've made some whoppers. But it's about then saying to them, okay, you're brand new. You've made this pretty big mistake. Let's talk it through. Okay, that's your one mistake. Don't do it again. And allowing people that ability to grow so that they feel safe, psychologically safe, in terms of coming forward and saying, actually, hands up, I'm going to own this one. I want to be the type of leader that apologizes. I want to be the type of leader that shows a vulnerability around the things in my own sort of leadership that also still need to improve, because that's what I want from the people growing into leaders below me and around me.
And you mentioned there both about making mistakes as well as about being an active learner. And I wonder if you could go back to your younger self, that sort of 18, 19, 20-year-olds, and give one or two pieces of advice to teenage Nikki. What might be the advice that you would pass on to yourself from your experiences since then?
Well, I mean, as a woman working in a quite often perceived as a men's kind of career, which isn't true, by the way, that we are sort of an equal pay profession. There are many, many women working in the prison service, which I love. I think that what I would say is to the younger version of me, feeling like I've got this skill, but I don't know if I can show it because the guys might laugh at me. And I would say to anybody, if you feel that's you, there is always a need to bring your authentic self to the table, but also to do that in a way where you can see the platform kind of growing your sphere of influence. So the truth is, who I am today as a governor with 24 years in is a much more confident version of myself than I was as a 23-year-old starting out as an officer. And some of the things I get away with at the moment, and I don't mean breaking the rules get away with, I mean some of these kind of crazy ideas that I'll launch in, people now will go, yeah, that's brilliant, let's do that. Whereas I know if I'd introduced that the first 4 weeks into career, they would have gone, what are you talking about? And I think we just have to acknowledge that sometimes your sphere of influence isn't at where your brain is and your creativity. So I would say be patient, get on with the job you're tasked with, improve the area around you, and don't worry about, changing the world, all around. Like just change the world where you are involved most intrinsically. And then as you kind of, that sphere grows, so will your approach and your ability to speak. And I think probably the other one is that don't think you have to have all the answers. That's the other thing I've become much more confident in. I used to feel like if somebody knocked on my door and asked me a question, I had to deliver the whole answer. Now I don't. Now I say to them, well, what do you think? Whereas I used to think if I ever said that, they would think I don't know the answer. The truth is I probably don't know the answer. There's a great book called Turn the Ship Around, which I would say to anybody David L. Marquette. Read that book if that, kind of hints at anything.
And I think I'm going to have to ask this then, in reference to the way that the prison services in different countries have been portrayed in the films over time. And thinking back to younger Nikki, now Governor Nikki, who would have to play you in the film of your life?
That's hilarious. I don't know. I mean, Kate Winslet, let's go for her. She's just somebody I really admire. I think she's really kind of gritty and bolshy, and that would work really well. But I can remember as an officer being told to tuck my shirt in by, it was just like being at school again. And I was doing something and my uniform shirt had come untucked, and they said, like, tuck your shirt in. And I can remember my school report cards always used to say, Nikki's cheeky. And actually, thank God for that cheekiness, because that's probably what makes me a gritty governor today. So don't let your school report cards hold you back, or your university, failures or successes. It's who you are and the character you bring that makes you into who you're going to be in the future.
And I think that's such a useful way actually to wrap this conversation up. I could go on for hours because I'm fascinated learning more about the role and the prison service overall. But you spoke about people coming in who have integrity, who have tenacity, who have resilience, who are good communicators, and the sort of people who think, hang on, that sounds like me, could do a lot worse than to check out the service. I think one thing you said right at the end repeated something you said early on about improving the area around you. And I think that regardless of the career route that somebody goes into, and obviously I have the privilege with this program of talking to so many different people from different careers, that at any stage, if you are thinking, what can I do to improve the area around me? You are going to be moving forward and you're going to be learning. And I think that's just wonderful. So Nikki, thank you so much for unwrapping your career for us and for joining us on Careers Unwrapped today. It's been fascinating. Thank you very much.
This podcast is sponsored by We Are Futures. To find out more about We Are Futures and how we can introduce your brand, business, or organization to the mass markets of tomorrow, visit www.wearefutures.com. Make sure to search for Careers Unwrapped in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Remember to click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at We Are Futures, thanks for listening.